Let's talk about the idea. The idea in itself is not an idea, it's actually the beginning of the invention process. And what I mean by this is when you come up with an idea for an invention, you need to be able to portray that to somebody else. Let's talk about the idea. The idea is not an idea. An idea is a... Let's talk about the idea. The idea is not an idea. It's actually the beginning of the entire invention process. It's where you as an inventor know exactly what your product needs to look like, how it functions, how it works, everything about it. You need to truly take the time to figure everything out when you're thinking about the idea, because the stage after idea is going to take you into drawings, but you're going to have to be able to take the idea, portray it to somebody, let's take just a second and talk about the idea itself. The idea is not really an idea. It's actually the beginning of the invention process. When you have an idea to say, oh, I want to throw something and it flies, well, that's a great idea. But to actually make me understand how I throw that and how it flies is a lot different concept than just, oh, I threw it. So nobody understands your product or your idea right now because it's new except you. But you're going to have to be able to sit down, talk with somebody, have a discussion on what your invention is, and they're going to have to be able to take your thought process and put it to paper to actually be able to create the design drawings, engineering drawings, to actually be able to produce your product. You know when people say they have a new idea for a new product or an invention, I don't really think they grasp just how important the idea is, because the idea is really a process. It's the beginning of your journey with your invention. It's something that you need to think through so very thoroughly about. When you talk about your product or your idea, you need to know how it functions, how it's shaped, what it's made out of. You really have to be able to describe your product, your idea in complete detail. You need to be able to describe your product in such a detail that a draftsman, an engineer, somebody's going to be able to take your idea and actually get it on paper to figure out how to actually build it to make it work. I'd like to take just a minute to talk about the idea. The idea in itself is a process. It's not just an idea. It's really easy to say, oh, I'm going to produce something, throw it in the air, and it's going to fly, and it's going to come back to me. Well, that's great, but when you threw it in the air, what made it fly? What made it come back to you? What's it made of? What shape is it in? These are all things that you're going to have to truly be able to, in your mind, when you have an idea for a new invention or a product, it's really not an idea. It's actually the beginning process. When you say I have a new idea for an invention or a product, it's really not an idea. You're actually in the beginning design stages of your product. This is so crucial. And what I mean by that is when you have an idea, somewhere along the line you're going to have to convey your thought process of what your idea is, how it functions, how it works, how it looks, everything about it to somebody else so they can put it on paper to make it a reality, to make it a real product. So when you're thinking about the idea of what your product is, you need to put great thought and time into truly thinking about what the product is. What does it do? What problem does it solve? How do we make people understand what it is? So you need to put a lot of thought process in there. Before anybody can take your thoughts and put them on paper, you're going to have to truly make them understand that. So during this process, you're going to have to truly think about the size, the shape, the color, the function, everything about your product. What makes it work? What makes it unique? And in your mind, you have to be able to see that finished product. It's not just the idea, it's truly a product. You have to be able to describe it to an engineer, a draftsman, to somebody that can actually get it down on paper to make this happen for you. It just doesn't happen by itself. So the idea is so important. So take the time to think the idea through before you go to the next stage. You have an idea? Well, when you have an idea, it really is one of the simplest stages of the invention process, or at least we think so. This is really not an idea. It's actually the invention and the engineering, designing of your product. So when you have an idea, make sure you can explain it, to understand it, to make me understand it, to make me see it. You know, the simpler the idea, the simpler the product, the easier it is to explain, to actually have it designed and engineered and manufactured. A lot of your inventions and your products are actually very complicated. They may not seem that when you look at a completed product, but getting from an idea to a completed product is such a process. You have to, during the idea process, truly inside of your mind, be able to visualize your finished product. You need to be able to explain to somebody how it's made, what size it is, what shape it is, what's it made of, what are the different functioning and working parts of this project in itself. Nobody's going to understand your product like you do until you actually get it onto engineering drawings and it's to that stage. I personally think that one of the most creative and fun parts of this entire process is the idea itself, because the idea is not just an idea. The idea of your project or your product is truly your vision of what can be. I know that in your mind you see a finished product, you see people using it, you understand how it works, but what you have to do in this process is truly take the time to understand that you're going to have to be able to portray this and enable somebody to take your thoughts, get them on paper to make this thing a reality. It doesn't just happen. So you need to be able to describe to me the working parts, the working functions. How does this thing work?